So thanks everybody for coming here today. I'm going to talk to you about what we do at Zendesk with DBT, our new data platform. Do a lot of really cool stuff, deliver a lot of great business value, and with that, let's just kind of get into the thick of it. So structure of this, I'll talk about who I am, I'll talk a little bit about what Zendesk is, what we do, talk to you about ZDP, we'll explain that acronym, and then a couple of the features of our platform that really enable developers to produce assets quickly and with high quality. Those are FeatureDB and dynamic warehouse management. And again, we'll get into all the gory details. We'll wrap up, in terms of like, what did we learn? What did I learn? I don't know. We'll figure it out. And then hopefully we'll have time for Q&A. So a little bit about me. I'm Chad Isenberg. I'm a data engineer. I'm in enterprise data and analytics. We're under the CIO org. Zendesk has many distributed data teams across a bunch of different functions. A little bit more about me. I've been working in the space for around 8 years. Last 3.5 years I've been at Zendesk. I do a lot of extracurriculars. I'm an editor of the Zendesk engineering blog. I try to post on Medium, LinkedIn. And then personally, I'm a husband, a dad, a dog dad, a cat dad. So like my schedule is fairly wild, to say the least. And then occasionally I try to contribute to open source software. Raised a couple of DBT issues. A couple of those have actually been addressed, which is cool. And then occasionally get to commit some code as well. So also to kind of get into what Zendesk is, because that's important for our next component. For those of you who aren't aware, we are a SaaS customer experience company. So we offer solutions that, for example, help desk and ticketing, knowledge base, contact center, a whole bunch of stuff to basically help you help your customers. So as you might imagine, recently we've gone very hard on the AI space and agentic AI. And in order to enable that, we need to have a strong data position. So that's kind of where we, where this project, our Zendesk data platform has come from. And so to give you a little bit of context, a long time ago, before this year, Zendesk, we had two analytics platforms. So on the one side, we had our product data. The Zendesk product itself lives in AWS, mostly a bunch of MySQL, Aurora DB shards. And so we would pull data out of this through some big data magic, EMR and Kafka, that sort of thing. We'd dump it in S3, and then we would do analytics via Athena, ML data science workloads as well. On the other side, we have enterprise data, and so that's what my team focuses on. So think about things like your CRM, your revenue platform, your GTM, go-to-marketing systems. All of that lived over in GCP. And there are some historic reasons for that. We don't need to get into it, but at the end of the day, we landed the data in GCP, we landed it in BigQuery via some kind of gnarly custom Airflow logic, and then we would do our transformations in DBT. And actually, when I started, we didn't even use DBT, and it was more Wild West, and it was much, much more interesting, but not nearly as good. So the problem with this, right? You have two different platforms. If you're an analyst, and you want to be able to do some cross-domain analytics. You want to know ARR for customers that activate a certain feature. We had cross-cloud pipelines that would do this, but they were fragile, they're expensive, they weren't always reliable. Or, this is the other way you could go about it, is you could go log into Athena with credentials that are totally separate from your BigQuery credentials because we didn't have a federated IAM system. You could go pull it into a spreadsheet, then go do the same thing in BigQuery and do your own kind of custom cross-cloud work. And obviously this is painful, right? Like this is really tough for analysts. Wasn't a great position. So at some point, the architecture team came together, decided on a consolidated data platform. And that is Zendesk data platform. This is ZDP. So again, same data sources, with these MySQL shards, along with a few event streams that we have that are coming directly out of the product. Our SaaS friends, those are all still there. But more or less, we are doing similar things, using Fivetran now instead of our bespoke Airflow connectors. And we're landing it directly into Snowflake. Then we use DBT And we'll go into more details on that, which we orchestrate mostly via Astronomer, which is a managed airflow solution. And then again, the analytics component or the platform that our users are using is Snowflake itself. So one thing I really want to stress here is that previously, transformation took place in Spark jobs, and it took place in dbt models. We don't do that anymore. At this point, we have one consolidated transformation tool, and that is dbt, which, again, a bunch of folks are able to consolidate on a single platform, a single tool, which gives us the ability to scale. And kind of to talk to that, we basically, and I did these slides before I got the note about the kind of the marketing change, maybe a little bit of heads up, Mark. But dbt platform or dbt core. And as a developer, you have some choice. And primarily, we use core for our centralized data pipelines. So think our golden layer, our critical reporting elements. This is good for folks who are familiar with more traditional software engineering workflows. They don't mind using dev containers or Docker. SSH keys don't scare you, that sort of thing. But a lot of people, that actually is a big hurdle. And so we use dbt cloud dbt platform for those folks, right? And so that's essentially how we split up those technologies. So just again, to kind of give you an idea, on dbt core, we have VS Code plus dev containers to provide a consistent development experience. So it's production-like development and a set of tools that is going to be consistent across developers. We do multi-project with dbt Loom, super cool package. If you haven't looked into it, you definitely should. And then our orchestration is Astronomer, and we use the Cosmos package to abstract away some of the more tricky parts of orchestrating or doing dbt job invocations. And then on the platform side, folks are using Studio, multi-project with dbt Mesh, and not just dbt Mesh for our platform projects, but hybrid as well. We're able to ship some of those assets from our core deployment. And then finally, they're doing orchestration via dbt jobs, which is a much, much simpler experience than writing your own Airflow DAGs, even with quite a bit of help. So just to kind of wrap on that, dbt at Zendesk is around, at this point, used by around 200 developers in total. About 150 of those are going to be on core, about 50 on platform. At this point, we have, I think, 3,000 models that we are executing with some frequency. Most of those are going to be daily. Some of those are going to be as little as, I think, every 15 minutes that we're going to be executing them. But so a lot of projects, hundreds of projects, thousands of models, a lot of scale. And to that point, we had to think of tools and technologies to enable this. So FeatureDB is one of those. So how we managed this prior to our transition to Snowflake is we used individual developer sandboxes. So this was pretty simple. We give every developer their own database. We messed around with the macros a little bit, so we would squash the database and the schema name into the schema. Things were great. This was way better than working in a shared development environment, which when I started, we did, and that's like a nightmare. It's not great when you have to share the same assets with other folks who are potentially running the same workflows on the same tables. This is again better than that, but there are a couple of problems. One, let's say you do your development, you like what you've done, you push it to production, you're good. But now you have another feature that you have to develop that's going to use the same tables. It's on you to remember, oh yeah, I actually built these tables and it has this data instead of using the production, instead of deferring to production. So you have to do that cleanup on your own. The other issue is, and it's really important for my team because we are frequently working directly with business stakeholders, and they want to see what the outputs are. They don't just trust that, well, we asked you to do this thing, but they want to make sure that it's actually what they asked for is what what they actually end up getting and what they want. So to that end, we do a lot of user acceptance testing. And so sharing these data sets became kind of cumbersome. Either it required individual developers to share, to have permissions to share their database and their schemas, or you ended up sharing the entire database with a usual UAT group. But if you're working on different features and different domains, it means people can have access to things that they probably shouldn't have access to. So it created this kind of weird security issue that, again, nothing untoward happened, but it's still a risk, and it's a gap that we wanted to close. So I love AI slop, which is why you're going to get that, and you're going to get this as well. But then I restrained myself, so this is going to be it. But we brought FeatureDB online, and so FeatureDB creates a new database via CI, and it's linked to a Git branch. And so we have some special naming conventions for these Git branches, basically parse that, and then we'll create a database with, a database that corresponds to that. Then we do some special magic where we'll align that with the profiles.yaml so that when you're, doing your kind of your local development, it's going to hit this FeatureDB. So this is a really powerful concept if you think about it. Every feature creates a disposable environment. You don't have to manage state. You don't have to worry about, oh, did I build these models in here? Do I have to drop them? Did I forget to do this? You just know you made a new branch, you made a new FeatureDB, and now you're good to go. The other thing that's really nice here is that we, in conjunction with another system, Zendesk's data store management, which we'll talk about in a moment, we can create, on a feature by feature basis, we can have permissions granted in kind of a structured and safe way. And so just to kind of show you what this workflow looks like. Up top, this is how how this will start. Developer, you're going to go cut a new branch. You'll make your changes. You'll push your PR, or you'll push your branch. And then GitHub Actions are going to make a request to the ZDM, Zendesk Data Store Management Service. ZDM, which manages, in addition to Snowflake databases, basically all of our data stores, and there are a bunch of them at Zendesk, as you might imagine. It'll create the database, and then the custom role with ownership of that database. It then grants that role to the user, and then you're good to go. The other cool thing about ZDM is that there is a web interface where you can go and say, I want to share this with this person. If they're on an approval list, let's say, my team works very frequently with finance. So we might share with Kevin, or we might share with David. They get approval. They can see the data in that database for that feature. If it's someone that's new and you don't typically work with them, it requires manager approval. But it provides a governed process where the developer isn't the one who's trying to make a call of like, should this person really be looking at this data? That's for someone higher up in the food chain. And then when you're done, you've merged your PR, everything looks great. Well, we tear all of this down. We'll basically submit a request to ZDM. ZDM will drop the database, it'll remove the role, and it'll drop it. And then you're good to go. If you have to, after this, if you kind of create your release, do all of this, you can immediately go to work on the next feature, and it doesn't matter how many of these tables you've already worked on in your previous feature. It's irrelevant because it's fresh. So the other technology that we have for scale and that enables us to work quickly and safely is dynamic warehouse management. And so to give you a little bit of an idea of kind of where we are at Zendesk, our strategy for managing locality and privacy is for our customers' data, for service data, the questions that people actually have in the tickets, which can be things that are going to be PHI, right? We have to have extra special controls over this. And one of those things that we do is we maintain them in the region that's associated with the customer, with our customers. So the way that we manage this is we have regional warehouses. And so you'll see this with AMER and EMEA, and structurally, these are going to be identical. That we are going to create across these accounts They're going to have the same databases, same schemas, and same tables. They're going to be built by the same DBT models with a little bit of Jinja magic, and then also some magic in our Airflow, in our Airflow DAGs. But more or less, we're going to be running the same code in 2 different places. So warehouse names are going to be consistent. For those of you who work in Snowflake, your warehouse, your virtual warehouse is going to be what determines your compute resources that you have available. So what happens though if AmAir contains, like, let's say double the volume of data of EMEA? And it may not be quite that, but let's say for the sake of argument, you may need an extra large to process a particular table in AmAir. But if we just kind of templated everything, you'd also use the extra large for EMEA, and you're going to be massively over-provisioned. So that's one of the issues that we're dealing with. The other side, for an incremental run, right? It's very possible that you may have something, in our experience, we can process a daily run with a small, but we need like a 2XL to do a full refresh. So what does this look like, right now? And again, this is more or less where what it looks like, or how we implemented this previously. We'd use these conditionals in our config blocks. And there are a couple of problems with this. One, it's incumbent upon the developer to remember all of the environment and all of the environments, all the warehouses. And it's not too bad when you're just doing prod and dev, but what about when you have to think about prod and dev across incremental and full refresh? And now you have to think about this across regions where these may be different. We also have pre-prod, we have CI environments, and this would be absolutely untenable. And typically what we were seeing, folks would just pick an entire a warehouse for the entire DAG, usually be the largest one that would suffice, and this led to a lot of waste. So this is no way to live, is kind of what I'd say. And so we just, some very smart engineers that I work with, not me, I can't even remotely take credit, they created this. And so basically some abstractions via macros where in the config block, you can basically say, what's the warehouse size? And that's going to be for your most materializations as well as your incremental. And then for the full refresh. And that's it. There is a lot of configurability here. You can basically define either in this config block or elsewhere in your project file. You can basically say, do I want to do step down for prod to dev? Do I want to do step down between AmAir and EMEA or APAC? All of that is configurable. The nice thing here is you don't have to worry about the specifics, right? Like you just have to think about, do I need a large warehouse, a medium, a small, an extra small, a 4XL? And the abstraction takes care of the rest. And this is awesome as far as friction goes. Like, I love using this. Again, wish I had come up with this, but again, I work with really, really, really smart people. So. That being said, the way that we do implement this has a few limitations. So we implement this via pre-hooks. So basically, it will inject into every query, we'll choose whatever warehouse that this kind of renders to. And the problem with that is it doesn't work with tests. So tests are going to use the default warehouse. If the way that these tests get implemented changes, or if we come up with a workaround, it's in the backlog, potentially we could support that. The other thing is the macro assumes that all warehouses are in all environments. It's dumb, it doesn't go and check that these things exist currently, so you can possibly have failures there. And then finally, we do make assumptions about your fleet name. So we do allow for a little bit of configurability here. Most of our workloads are going to run on shared resources, but occasionally we'll have very important resources or assets that are going to require us to do a little more to have some more isolation. And for those, they'll be on a different fleet. And we're kind of rigid on what that fleet structure looks like. But again, those are kind of the major things. And so, dealing with those small headaches, you're clearing up a lot of other ones. And so let's kind of talk, recap, what did we go over? So ZDP, Zendesk Data Platform, it's allowed us to consolidate our analytics platforms. Simplify our data management, and it allows Zendesk employees to use product and SaaS data in the same place, which has really been powerful for analytics and has enabled a lot of opportunities. FeatureDB removes a ton of developer friction. It's much faster and easier to get features out there. It's much faster and easier to share these with our stakeholders for you at. And, we don't have to spend all of this time kind of managing, these databases because, again, automation does that for us. And then finally, dynamic warehouse management allows us to maintain our compliance standards while still, without creating that burden of complex environment management. It's much, much simpler to kind of work within our framework than trying to, manage these very complex conditional statements. And so at the end of the day, this is like, we're working faster, we're building more stuff, getting more insights, and we're getting more value. Because like I'm a technologist, I love the technology, it's super cool, but at the end of the day, if it's not generating value, then why are we even doing it? So if you want to know more about me, I've got this in the slides. You can look me up on LinkedIn, Zendesk engineering blog, zendesk.com. Certainly feel free to ping me. I can put you in touch with someone in the account team if you're interested in a world-class SaaS CX product. And that's it. That's all I got.
Any questions? All right.
Hey, I just wanted to ask like a clarifying question. So with FeatureDB, is it kind of like a different paradigm to kind of having like lower and upper environments and kind of just being able to like push fast out to prod kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's more along the lines of, from a development standpoint, if previously you had a static sandbox environment that you would do your development against, which is how we managed things before. You have a lot of stuff that you kind of have to manage in terms of, do you have to drop these tables, these schemas exist, like what is actually going to happen when I run a DBT run with deferral, like what's going to happen? And this removes all of that. You get, again, a fresh prod-like environment with every branch. And that's really the power, is that you don't have to worry about the state and the environment, management. It just kind of gets abstracted away.
Thank you. Okay, so we are moving into having multiple people working in the same environment, and we're running into some of those issues as well of working on a feature, QA gets that, starts testing it. Oh, somebody already did a DBT run over here, so we're running into that. So as you moved into that FeatureDB mindset, so when that makes a copy, is it like a full copy of the database? How do you make sure data tests are valid on that before going to prod?
Yeah, so the way that we set things up currently, the database is essentially empty, and we rely on DBT defer. So our production manifests are available, and essentially, since if you're not building that model, it's going to hit prod. So that's what we're kind of relying on for the mechanism to ensure that you're getting a consistent, asset from environment or from database to database.
Yeah, I had kind of a similar question about the FeatureDB. You mentioned like it uses DBT defer, which is kind of what I was going to ask about. But how did you configure it? Is it a DBT configuration? Is it a Snowflake configuration? And you might not know, but would it be possible to configure this for like a BigQuery warehouse or a different type of data warehouse? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that it would probably be a little different because, on the Snowflake platform, selecting, a warehouse is, it's something you can do with, DDL. And, basically before the query, because we use pre-hooks, where essentially we say, okay, whatever the default warehouse is, we're going to actually use this warehouse instead. On the BigQuery side, I think that's project-based in terms of how many, the slot cap. And that's actually going to be a little bit different because then you're going to have to figure out, it's an interesting challenge, but it's something that I believe you could manage. It just would require some engineering effort. Yeah?
I had a quick question about the feature branches, more specifically like database migrations or seeding data in those environments that you can then like test your workflows against. Like how does that work?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
So like for example, let's say like I'm a new developer, I want to test like a new model. I'm working on my own DB, but production has data
Yes.
that I want to then test against. But in my development environment, maybe I don't have that data that's in prod. Like how do you manage then like syncing data across environments? Is that something that FeatureDB does? Or
Yeah, and yes, and that's something where deferral, which is a standard DBT feature common across core and platform, that deferral is what's going to defer to production. So you just basically have to make it aware of the production manifest, and there are a bunch of, you can search online tons of resources for this, and then it's going to know that asset that I'm referencing doesn't exist in my current target, and so it's going to say, hey, I'll go to prod instead. And then it'll get that production data. Or if you don't have to defer to prod, you can defer to other environments, but that's typically how folks work.
Did you guys look into, or was there any thought put into using something like dbt clone, which leverages Snowflake zero copy clone, versus using defer and setting up empty databases?
Yeah, we've gone back and forth on that. And I think there are pros and cons of that approach. We've mostly been happy with deferral. We use clone for some other niche use cases. I guess I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what do you think is the value of doing the zero copy clone? I mean, because again, FeatureDB, we eventually do destroy the database, and again, if you're not modifying the values, it's not going to to matter. What do you see as kind of the advantage?
I think probably just the developer experience. So like if I'm working on my own feature branch and I'm testing a model, I don't have to like, if I want to look at the model I built, and then maybe I want to look at like the upstream model at the same time to see why my model built the way it did. I don't need to jump around between environments and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay, so you just want to basically, you want to, the database you want to be consistent. Yeah. So yeah.
From like a cost perspective, pretty much watch it be the same, right?
It's going to be exactly identical because zero copy clone isn't going to care. You're not storing any additional data. So yeah, that would be perfectly valid.
Coalesce ends in 2 minutes. You have the chance to ask the last question of the conference. What's it going to be? Anybody else? Okay, give it up for Chad. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.